Zita Janji, head of Microsoft D365 at Digital Gurus, and welcome to our International Women's Day series, where we are shining a light on women in the Microsoft and D365 space. And today I am very excited to be joined by Emma Beckett. Emma, can you please introduce yourself?
Thanks, Eddie. Yes. So I'm Emma Beckett, as you've just alluded to. I've worked in the dynamic space for about 10 to 12 years now. I run a testing, QA, and training consultancy that specializes primarily in dynamics. I always say that's our bread and butter. And that's kind of a little about me on this front.
Amazing. And Emma, you've had a very non-conventional journey into dynamics, which not everyone will be aware of. Can you please tell us about that?
Yeah, apologies for anyone that follows me on LinkedIn because it does appear once or twice. But no, you're exactly right. I used to be a professional footballer once upon a time. It really does feel like a lifetime ago. So I did that for the best part of 20 years. And probably at the age of 23, I realised that I was probably born a little bit too early. So even of the heights of women's football at the time, it didn't quite equate to financial stability. So there was a plan B, and that plan B was finding a pathway into dynamics and also into testing.
Yeah, amazing. And I'm sure there's a lot of people listening who are exploring a career into Microsoft or Dynamics, but potentially not sure how to make that move. Why did you choose to go down the testing route?
Um, I always say, like in a nutshell, I get paid to be critical, and that's for me. It seems easier than most, I reckon. I'm not sure if that's good or bad, but I kind of had a best friend growing up, and she worked for a great company in Milton Keynes, a Volkswagen, as I'm sure a couple of people have heard of it. And she became a test analyst in some in a seconded role. Eventually moved on to greater heights and became a director of testing and went through so many different kind of stories and pathways as a contractor. She relocated and is still involved in delivery, not so much Microsoft, but she delivers, a lot of kudos to everything she's done in the banking sector. But for me, I saw her succeeding and excelling, and I kind of wanted a slice of the pie, really. It made a lot of sense, and me being the person I was, I took it upon myself to figure out what she was doing, how she did it, became certified, and then luckily when I worked at the Open University, again another lifetime ago, probably about 13, 14 years ago, it just so happened that eventually a test academy was created, and what they asked for was about 6 people to apply and fulfill these roles within the business. And it was looking after the student registration system essentially. So anyone that was looking to study at the OU would have to come through the solution that we built. So for me, that was my introduction. The plan was to do a year in that academy. So I'd already done a lot of kind of predetermined education on testing myself. But I stayed there for 6 months. I didn't stay out the full year. And this is probably nothing to do with the people that were involved. It's just my ambition at the time. And I left and became a contractor. So that was, yeah, back in 2014 now, which again, it feels like another person. It's insane talking about it and thinking about it, just because there's been so much that's evolved since.
Yeah, but also I think 14 years isn't realistically that long, considering you've made a move from professional footballer through to testing and then to choose to go into the contracting world very early on as well. Very bold moves, Emma.
Oh, I'm brazen. It's you can blame the Irish and Mancunian heritage. Yeah, I've been very fortunate to be surrounded by very strong women in my family and friends and teammates now. But probably more importantly, I've got some incredibly strong males in my life that advocate in a way that, certain people don't.
Yeah, and it's so interesting that journey and that transition as well. And obviously, how have you been able to channel all of that and bring that into Fortitude 17, would you say?
A lot of it really stems from sport. I think I got lucky in some ways because I recently found out that I'm neurospicy and neurodiverse, and it really aligns to testing. So the ability to work under pressure, to silo myself off and just kind of focus on one particular job. And being, growing up in sport and that becoming almost, my bloodline for so long. And I am competitive, I am ambitious. And when you combine the neuro spiciness with that natural ambition and sport and that competitiveness, like I knew as a quite a young child that I always wanted to kind of have a business. I didn't know the kind of method I would get there, and when I left school, like, there was no part of my education that featured in tech. It was one area, one arena that I definitely thought I wouldn't head into. But as I said, when I kind of got to my mid-20s as a player, I realized that I needed to have a plan B, and I got to the point where I actually really got my teeth into testing and again was very fortunate to have some really good jobs that kind of really tested and pulled me through. Um, and fast forward to 3 years ago, I finally retired from football in my mid-30s, and my first hire was another former teammate of mine. Similar position, wanted to retrain, wanted to do something different. And just in the way someone had advocated for me once upon a time, I did the same, and we had an extensive training program because one of the hardest challenges that we encountered were people saying, well, why would we hire a bunch of former athletes? What do you know about the business and what do you know about dynamics? And for me, I've grown into this kind of test director, test manager role where I'm very hands-on still. So there's probably not too much about dynamics that I've not tinkered with at this point. And that's the way the team is. So when you kind of build a team or a collective of some former athletes and you marry it with the right mix of people, we have this real zest for success. And I think that's actually something that sets our mini consultancy apart. It's the ability to converse with people, to understand, to collaborate. We grew up in teams from when we were 7, so that kind of is almost inbuilt. And I knew for me that I wanted to hire the right people with that kind of same ambition. They're almost pre-qualified as a character, so I know everything about them almost to a point. I know that these people are always in the trenches with you. So for us to get to the point where I'm actually fortunate enough to be in a business surrounded by incredibly strong people and in particular strong women, I just feel very fortunate, very privileged.
Yeah, and it's incredible that you've still, I think, stayed true to your roots as well, to marry them up from bringing in ex-footballers into the business and obviously making huge waves. Is so important as well. I guess if you had to sort of reflect on the last few years, were there any specific challenges that have potentially presented themselves that you weren't necessarily prepared for?
Absolutely, absolutely. It's been no surprise that the market's been pretty quiet since COVID. We've been in a very fortunate position until probably the last couple of months, being really candid here, where we've relied a lot on word of mouth. So me being a contractor for 9, 10 years before expanding the business, it put us in a nice position, and we're actually able, thanks to a lot of people I've worked with in the past, to stay pretty steady and comfortable with the market shaking as much as it has. I would say, in addition to people initially not taking us serious, and not so much me, but any other counterparts that I brought in, in spite of all the training that the team did and all the qualifications gained, I think sometimes people had a hard time differentiating that, you know, yes, we were former athletes, but actually that doesn't speak to the here and now. I would say it's probably been convincing people and making people aware that actually, if they invest in testing earlier, they actually save a lot more money. I know so many businesses, they kind of see testing as a transformation piece that falls right at the very end of a life cycle. And actually, if you even tentatively or intermittently have someone involved from the infancy of the program, you get a much better steer and you actually save a lot more. So it's kind of converting that, the client mindset of cost versus an actual investment.
Mm. And it's just drilling down as well onto that message and making sure that everybody hears it.
Yeah, it's been tricky. So we're looking at marketing and working with good people such as yourself to try and really change that kind of archaic mindset, because we do a lot more than testing. I always say, and this is again a terrible football analogy, but we're almost a central midfielder to a program. We spend a lot of time analyzing and assessing and checking our shoulder and seeing what's about to come our way. And again, that's kind of all around the element of risk. So if you have people that are immersed in this for a living and you're not trying to get a wonderful developer or a wonderful BA or a wonderful functional consultant to do testing, it stops you, one, diluting their role, and two, you have people that, wake up and do this as a given. So it really has been quite tricky and something that I haven't quite accomplished yet. But again, I have good people that can help me and guide that thought process.
And still very early on in the journey as well, and you've achieved so much in really a short time, and it's only going to get bigger and better as more businesses look at the adoption piece and hopefully decide to run it concurrently to the large transformations that they do, which they do spend so much money on. So yeah,
I hope you're
it's
right.
yeah. No, and in terms of that, we've discussed about being nice in a high stakes program. What would you say the cost of that is?
More than people probably realize. It's something that I was probably quite green and naive coming into the tech realm. I didn't realize, some of the kind of being again quite open, the political kind of constraints that maybe are, in place in some particular clients or some vendors, some partners. And it's really how do you tackle that? For me, I thought being honest, being direct, and speaking with intention and speaking from a place of experience is enough to carry the conversation and in particular, I'm a strong listener. One of my strengths, I would say, is the ability to just kind of hear people and kind of, I suppose, associate on an empathetic level. So sometimes that's mistaken as kind of quietness equals kindness equals a problem because, this person isn't forthcoming and actually they don't see the bigger picture. And that has been something that I kind of learned in a hard way, actually, when I was in my kind of mid-20s or so. I remember one particular role where I was hired in as a test lead, and someone was kind of brought in at a director level that kind of was very vociferous, very kind of opinionated. And actually, as the project transgressed, that particular person came to me and said, "I'm so sorry. I hired someone else above you because I actually thought you were too quiet." And if anyone that knows me will talk to that, I think yeah, it's pretty surprising. I'd like to speak with intention, and at times, how do you learn anything if you're not prepared to listen, right?
Definitely. I think it's so important as well. I think especially when those heated conversations do happen, especially when the budgets as they are and lives and roles are on the table as well for these people that are involved in these programs. It's so important to just sit back, listen and take it in and then step in and add value and show that you have the solutions as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's ironic because one of my idols is Roy Keane, and he's certainly not known for being quiet either on or off the pitch these days. So actually, it's and speaking to a fellow Mancunian, it just takes time. I'm never going to come into any program, and as we spoke about offline with testing, there is a lot of brownfield implementation. So things going wrong, and you're kind of brought in at the 11th hour rather than that pretty greenfield program that everyone wants to be on. So for us, we've drafted in at the 11th hour, and for me, my tactic is to always observe, within, obvious and sensible time limits, but is to just take things on and understand before you start kind of, casting your opinions around and making changes, because chances are sometimes things aren't actually too far wrong. It's just how you collaborate, how you bring it together. And I think that's where my team is special.
Yeah, no, I love that, Emma. Thank you for sharing that. And we've also discussed about women being the spine of the team. What does that mean to you?
Everything, everything. Especially as a midfielder where I was part of the spine of the
Mm.
team. I'm pretty biased. It really is kind of core to what I know. One of my mentors, he actually has just started a podcast, and again, in quality assurance, that's his baby, as is mine. And he's kind of openly declared the best testers are women, and I'll let everyone else go and fight him afterwards. But it's just quite intriguing to hear that. And everything I've kind of spoken to at the start of this call, around what my team looks like, the kind of characters we want to bring in, the influence we try to have on a program, it's not just limited to testing. You know, I spoke to being the central midfielders, but actually, you know, as much of it, as much as it's a joke, it's also not, because we are able to do. So, for example, my team organically ended up in training and cut over and go live readiness and things like user adoption and change, because we have that ability to connect with people in a different way, and that kind of sets us apart from our kind of competitors or anyone else that just runs like a specific test consultancy. We try and advocate for the areas that maybe are falling short, but we know are going to kind of pinch us at the end. You know, it's something you and I have spoken about again. But with a project life cycle, if you think about all the kind of 5 key areas, by the time you come around to deployment and testing, if everything else has slipped, by the time you get to testing, we are working on this insane crunch, often with a budget pinch as well. So for us, it makes sense for us to have a hand in things and just to be aware. And it comes from that kind of listening comment I made earlier.
Yeah. Oh, I love that, Emma. Thanks so much for sharing that. And I guess as we sort of round off, what would be one final nugget or piece of advice that you would like to share?
I would say globally to advocate. I'm a big fan of equity. You know, it's always the best people to do the job, but it's important to have opportunity for everyone to compete for those jobs. Whether, you know, whether it comes down to race, age, gender, it's really important for me to make sure that people can have a seat at the table. And I think for anyone that is listening to this that is maybe thinking about International Women's Day, I would say advocate for your female colleagues. Make sure that they have a voice. Make sure that you're part of the solution rather than the problem.
Love that. Thank you so much. It's been incredible for you to be part of this International Women's Day series, Emma. So thank you so much.
My absolute pleasure, Zita. Thank you so much for the honour.